It is a curious thing in Star Trek that technological advancement seems to be linked so demonstrably to an increase in starship size. The Enterprise of the classic era was big, aircraft carrier sized in fact. But for the next generation era, the new Enterprise had to be bigger. But was it too big? Of course, some might say that the D can never be too big, but let's keep this discussion family friendly. If we have a theme here, then it is the tension between promise and delivery, dream and reality. In this video, we shall first show how big the Enterprise D was supposed to be before considering the problem this presents. In universe, the Enterprise had 42 decks, which, as many will tell you, is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. She was 2,106 feet, or 642 meters, long, and 1,519 feet, or 463 meters, wide, with a height of 449 feet. Or 137 meters. These are meaningless numbers until we put her next to something else. Here is Orthanc from The Lord of the Rings, a structure at least 500 feet, 152 meters, in height. And here we see the Enterprise next to it, easily dwarfing the Wizard's Tower. And yet, this is not very satisfactory. We need a real-world building. There are go-to candidates, and we would be remiss not to use them. The height of the Eiffel Tower, the Iron Lady of Paris, is given as about 1,000 feet, or around 330 meters. This is double that of Orthanc and comparable to the length of the refit Enterprise of Kirk. Even as she hovers over the ground, the Enterprise D has not the height. And yet, we cannot have 1,000 people living on the Eiffel Tower. Well, not comfortably. On the other side of the North Atlantic, we have the Empire State Building, standing at 1,454 feet, or 443 meters tall. A random fact, they started construction of this bad boy in March 1930 and completed it in April 1931, only 13 months later. An iconic 102-floor Art Deco office building, and they built it in only 13 months. Try doing that these days, especially in central London, which segues nicely to our next comparison. Here we have a rough slice of central London, more specifically Whitehall, squeezed between St James's Park to the west and the River Thames to the east. We have Westminster Abbey here on the south side of Parliament Square. The square is in the centre of what was, once upon a time, an island, Thorney Island, or the Isle of Thorns. How fitting then that on its eastern side stands the Palace of Westminster. Moving north along Whitehall, we find the cenotaph to Britain's war dead, and in this little corner, Downing Street, a street named after a very shady character, and home to some very shady characters. Up here is Horse Guards Parade, and it is the distance between the Abbey and Horse Guards Parade that equals the length of the Enterprise D, although given the size of the parade ground, it really depends on where you stand. The distance can be walked in 5 to 10 minutes. As we can see, this covers a lot of ground, and the stress on the ship's hull would be tremendous. This was not lost on the TNG production staff, who invented the concept of a structural integrity field to help hold the ship together when in motion. But, I imagine I hear you cry, how is her size a problem? The Enterprise D was not too big. There is an argument for the TNG Enterprise being precisely the size she needs to be. Such a starship must be a mini-Earth, carrying everything with her. Gravity, air, warmth, energy creation, food, water, sanitation systems, navigation systems, propulsion, weapons, shields, cargo storage, science laboratories, as well as accommodation and all that is necessary to hold the icy terror of space at bay. You may notice the paintings in my recreations are those of Earth landscapes rather than of space, very unlike in TNG. Why would you want a painting of outer space when you can just look out of a window and see the real thing? The Enterprise D would need to be large, but the original Enterprise had all of this and was perfectly adequate, so why double the length? Why make the newer ship so broad? Why have double the decks? Here I argue that in making the Galaxy-class Enterprise so much larger than what had come before, the art department created a rod for the next generation back. You might ask, is it really a rod if no one notices? The answer is no, not really. Its conjectural existence does not adversely affect my enjoyment of Star Trek The Next Generation, but here we like to ponder and to question. The Enterprise model offers a great deal. So many windows, so many hatches, so many features. But the series seldom explored those features. There is a sense of opportunities lost, and two particular features of the Enterprise D illustrate my point wonderfully: the captain's yacht and the main shuttle bay. Whilst Voyager's Aero shuttle might not have been fitted by the time she vanished in the Badlands, the same excuse is not so readily available for the captain's yacht of the Enterprise. Named by Patrick Stewart the Calypso, a reference to Jean Cousteau's famous research ship, the yacht was visible attached to the underside of the saucer. In the series, Picard so often opted for a little shuttle over his yacht, so often in fact as to be unrealistic. Why put it into the design of the Enterprise if you never use it? On the subject of shuttles, why come and go using a smaller pair of shuttle bays when there was a main shuttle bay waiting to be used? We spotted it briefly in Cause and Effect, but a matte painting could have stood in for it, in a manner not unlike the final warehouse shot in Raiders of the Lost Ark. TNG seemed to ignore this large complex, even though it was so clearly visible on the model. Both features were redundant, destined not to be used during the next generation. They would have been added to the model because the Enterprise D was to be a large vessel. The budget for the television series, however, would not stretch so far as to make use of them on screen. Had the Enterprise been smaller though, then the main shuttle bay could have been the only shuttle bay, and the Shuttle Bay 2 production set we saw in the series would have been adequate. Had the Enterprise been smaller, then instead of a redundant captain's yacht, they could have had an extra sensor platform under the saucer and no one would have been any the wiser. By claiming such facilities existed, but not showing those facilities in action, TNG made what we saw of the interior of the Enterprise D feel smaller, as small as, say, a television production set, rather than as a 2,000-foot-long Galaxy-class starship. A particularly telling example was main engineering. This was a very extensive redress of the engineering set built for Star Trek Phase 2 and the 1979 film Star Trek The Motion Picture, and yet it seems remarkably small and limited in scale once turned into a Galaxy-class engineering space. To be fair, what we saw was limited, and so perhaps we can suppose that there was a lot more of it out of sight. But for a vessel the size of the Galaxy class, we might expect something larger. And then there was the ship's onboard theatre. Surely a ship as large as the Enterprise D would have had a full-sized theatre, rather than the simple redresses of 10 forward that we saw in the series. There was the dream that was the Galaxy-class Enterprise. And then there was the television budgeted reality. The design of the Enterprise D promised so much. A captain's yacht, a big main shuttle bay. We did not get to see those features, certainly not in their full glory. What lay behind those windows under the saucer? I do not recall ever finding out. An observation lounge, say like 10 forward, would have been ideal. but of course it would have been 11 forward or 12 forward. Not as catchy a name. And surely the view would have included the rim of the saucer. Ironically, the saucer rim of the 6-foot studio model was too thin to accommodate the actual 10 forward, and so a new 4-foot model with a thicker rim had to be built. If there is a lesson in this, then it is not to promise more than you have budgeted. The Enterprise D could have been no longer than an Excelsior-class starship, and yet still would have been the larger vessel based on width and bulk. A 1,000-head crew would rattle about inside so big a ship. Did the TNG Enterprise really need to be so much larger in order to boldly go where no one had gone before? I will let all of you decide, and hope that you liked this video, or at least didn't hate it.